And we're recording.
We are recording. People are joining. Hello, everybody.
Morning, all. Room is filling up. So you lovely early joiners, you prompt people. Wow, I even recognize quite a few names in this list already, Graham. That's fantastic.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah, I've got previous workshop participants and clients. Let us know that it's all feeling good at your end. Find the chat controls. Drop us a message in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from this morning. And how's it going? What lockdown working from home style been like for some of you? Has this made your procrastination worse or better? We shall see as we explore.
I'm going live on Instagram at the same time, and we are using a light bulb and a pint glass to hold it in place just behind the camera.
Best audiovisual technology.
There we go.
So Paula is saying hello from Bogota in Colombia. That's amazing.
Cool.
Fantastic. So those of you saying hello in the chat, messages coming into myself and Graham as panelists, which is brilliant, but everyone else will need to see them. So you will find there's a little option in your chat controls before you send a message. You can just swap it round so it comes through to all panelists and attendees, just like Sarah has done there, saying good morning or good afternoon from Ireland. Fantastic.
Cool. Hi, everyone joining on Instagram. We're live. We're also live on Zoom. So we're going to be starting in about a minute's time. If you have questions about procrastination, you can also put them in the Instagram live chat, and I will stretch my head over my computer to be able to see them. But we're simultaneous. Is it called a simulcast when you do that? Is that what that is?
Oh, all these new words, Graham. You know I don't.
Simultaneously streaming in multiple places.
So the room's filling up. We got 50, 60 already. And we've got all sorts of representation from across the UK, Brighton, Wigan, Gloucester, Derby, Surrey, Manchester, Exeter, Glasgow, Hastings. Any international attendees, make yourself known. And again, really nice if you can drop those chats through to all of us rather than just myself and Graham. And we'll be using that throughout the session as well.
Cool.
Hello, Simon from Bristol. That's where I am as well. You get extra points for the Bristol crew being in this afternoon.
So we've got Lee on the line from Bristol. I'm down in sunny Brighton today. Very sunny down here.
Is it really sunny, or are you just saying?
Yeah, no, it's been lovely today. It's been really nice. I've been down for a meeting on the beach in Brighton today, this morning.
Hello, Rosie.
Nice.
Yes, I remember you very well from Swansea Students' Union. Fantastic to see you again. I follow your adventures on Twitter as well, and quite active on LinkedIn. And
hi, Laura.
Tanya in Exeter, good to see your name in on the session as well. Lots of lovely people.
Right, are we going to give people a minute? Are we going to kick off? What's the...
We got 75, 80. I'd say let's give people 30 seconds to throw them.
Give it 30 seconds and then we will make a start.
Hello, Francisco from New York.
Cool. So we've got New York, we've got Colombia, and of course Bristol, the most important place.
It is literally the center of the universe. I see Bristol and Brighton as friendly rivals.
Yeah, Bristol and Brighton have sort of some
cultural
connections, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Fem in Belgium. Savannah in London. Kristen in Alberta. Excellent. That's the Alberta in Canada, I'm presuming. Fantastic.
Cool. So we're getting around the world, which is great.
Stephen there bringing in my question about how lockdown's been going. The same four walls every day. It has been tricky. I think you should kick off, Graham.
Right.
We're at the 100, so let's go for it.
Great. Right, let's make a start. So welcome, everybody. This is part of Think Productive's free webinar series. And our topic for today is how to stop procrastinating tomorrow. So those of you who don't know me, so I'm Graham Allcott. I'm the founder of Think Productive. We've been going for about 12 years, and our mission is really helping people to make space for what matters, and ultimately get a lot more done and feel good about doing it at the same time. So I founded the company. We've been on this mission to really turn people into productivity ninjas, and our first ever ninja was Lee Cottier. So do you want to say hello, Lee?
Yep. So I joined the company about 15, 18 months after Graham started it. My background was in learning and development and training, but I'd always had a kind of personal interest in our particular niche of productivity meets well-being. So I was really keen to get involved, and I've been working with a team for coming up to 11 years now. So I'm based in Bristol in the southwest of the UK. I work with clients across the sort of southwest and South Wales, but I do get further afield. And I work particularly with a lot of public sector and charitable sector organizations as well. So I can see quite a lot of people that I've worked with before, names that I'm familiar from various organizations like that.
Good stuff. Right. So let's start with what is procrastination. So it might be no surprise to you that you are not alone. Everybody, it seems like, really feels this issue of procrastination very closely to their hearts. One thing that's worth saying is that in a month, there are over 1.5 million Google searches around procrastination and how to stop procrastinating. So you are definitely not alone. And in terms of definitions, I did a bit of reading around some of the academic definitions of procrastination, just for a little bit of fun, really. And a couple of really choice phrases came up. So a couple of the academic definitions. One is delay in conjunction with subjective discomfort. Another is the illogical delay of behavior. So it's fair to say that procrastination is not just about being in a place where something hasn't been done. It hasn't been done and you feel really bad about it at the same time. So it's those two things together where ultimately we get into a spiral of feeling guilty. We get into a spiral of negative thinking, negative self-worth. And one academic at the University of Calgary actually described it as self-harm, which is a very strong term. But when we really start to think about procrastination as an issue, when we really start to think about how it affects our work, how it affects our lives, it's really worth holding on to that very severe terminology of self-harm, because I really think there's something to be said for eliminating it just by our thinking, right? So actually often the thing that will get us away from procrastination is just changing our mindset, just changing our thinking. And actually that's the good news, is that there's a lot that we can do about this that will really, really help. So let's talk about why we procrastinate. So what you can see on this screen here is the ninja recognizing their lizard brain, recognizing that they are part lizard. So we are all part lizard. What I mean by that is that we all have a part of our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is the bit at the back of our brain. So if you imagine that you are, slicing the brain at the back and seeing, what a brain would look like on those kind of school biology models and so on. It's that bit at the back, not the bit that looks like a brain. So that's your kind of neocortex, prefrontal cortex, which gives you logic, gives you creativity, gives you a lot of the stuff that will really help you in your work and life. But the lizard brain it's so called because it's the only part of the brain that lizards have. A lizard only has an amygdala, basically. And it's the part of the brain that we evolved from. So it's a very important evolutionary part of the brain. And what that means is it deals with all of the very base functions of the way we think. So it deals with territory, it deals with reproduction, it deals with hunger, survival, all the things that really help us to evolve and keep the species going, right? But what that means is it has a very primal set of urges that get in the way. And when it comes to our work, that becomes a really important thing. So if you think about a time where you've been sat in a meeting and everyone's about to go around the table and they're going to say their name and they're going to say, one thing you're working on. And it's a really simple thing. We've all been there. We've all had to do that. But sometimes what happens is, even as we're going around the table, our brain starts to say things to us like, oh, don't screw this up, you know, like I don't want to look stupid, and we start to really worry about this thing that we have to do, and all we have to do is say our name and say what we're working on. It's a really, really simple thing. That's the lizard brain, right? So that's the part of the brain that's saying to us, blend in, don't stand out, resist anything that might result in judgment, stay away from anything that feels risky, and stay as close as possible to things that feel safe. And so this is a really difficult thing to acknowledge, that we have this very base primal part of the brain. And of course, because it's the evolutionary part of the brain, it shouts the loudest, right? So the fact that it's constantly giving us these messages often pulls us away from really, you know, useful and important stuff that we could be doing, and particularly the things that are going to involve risk-taking, creativity, you know, pushing the needle a little bit, doing things a little bit differently. That's the stuff that often our lizard brain really resists, avoids, and wants to take us away from. So we really need to start thinking about how we can change this, how we can do some things that are going to, you know, really help. So the first thing to say around this is we need to acknowledge it and start to be a bit more ruthless with ourselves, like work out some of the systems, some of the boundaries, some of the ground rules that can really start to change things. So once we start to acknowledge that we have this lizard brain, once we can start to see that there's this part of us that is intent on derailing us and causing ourselves this harm, then we can start to do something much better about it. And I think really the key for me in that is thinking about the diagnostics, right? So it's very easy when we start to procrastinate to start beating ourselves up. What's harder sometimes is to really have a conversation with ourselves where we start to break procrastination down into, you know, where is this coming from? Like, what's the thought process? And once we start to understand our lizard brain, then we can start to manage it and do something differently. So I'm going to talk you through these 4 elements of procrastination. And this is a diagnostic tool that I developed called DUST. So difficult, undefined, scary, and tedious. Difficult, undefined, scary, and tedious. So let's think about when something is difficult. There are things that we need to put in place. Often when things are difficult, the best way to deal with that is to rephrase the action that we were going to take away from it being about, I'm going to do this thing, and much more towards solving the skills gap and ultimately making this less difficult. So an example of that might be, right, I've got to do this thing. I've never done it before, but I know my colleague has done something similar before, so I'm going to talk to them, get advice. Or there's this new thing, it involves this new piece of software, I've never used it before. Actually, I just need to get some training. So before I can start doing the thing, close that skills gap, close that gap that stops making it difficult. Undefined. So often, you know, our experience when Lee and I are going out and working with organizations is that there's so many people working with to-do lists that are just undefined. So many teams working with, you know, big projects that are just not well defined. And actually, once we start to get definition around this stuff, it will really help. We're going to give you a few more tips in a minute around some of the ways to get definition around your projects and actions. When something's scary, again, you know, back to the lizard brain is scared of judgment. The lizard brain is scared of getting things wrong. When something is scary, we need to often create a bigger fear, right? So often if you've got, you know, a piece of work that needs to be done by Friday or something, and you're really scared about starting it and you feel yourself procrastinating, one of the best things you can do is create a bigger fear, which is emailing your boss and saying, hey, let's go through this thing that I'm working on right now on Monday morning, and I'm going to send it to you on Friday. And now suddenly we have this bigger fear, which is there's going to be a meeting on Monday. I don't want to sit in the meeting and have nothing to say and nothing going on. So that bigger fear kind of replaces that fear of judgment, and things get better.
I also love that the most scary image that you could put next to that was the ghost from 1980s Pac-Man. Those were friendly ghosts.
It's the friendly ghost. And then tedious. So if you've ever been sat there doing the washing up while you're doing while you're listening to a podcast, or you know, perhaps like my mum when I was growing up would always be like watching soap operas while she did the ironing and stuff like that. So find something else that makes it more interesting, more fun, and just kind of replace that sense of tedium with something that makes it a bit more palatable. And let's talk about another thing that's really important when we start to look at tactics around procrastination. One thing that really matters is having a good, what we call second brain. So a second brain is a place where we keep the lists, the information around our work. Most people will have some kind of to-do list. But what we talk about when we talk about a second brain at Think Productive is a little bit more detailed than that. And actually, a lot of people's to-do lists don't work. So if you've ever been, sat looking at your to-do list and you look at it and you're saying to yourself, but there's stuff on this list, but I also know there's loads of other stuff that I need to do. Then what's happening is you're not trusting that to-do list. So a second brain is really a much more detailed system where you start to really trust that everything that you need to remember, everything that you're working on is stored in this idea of the second brain. David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done, has this lovely phrase: the mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. So if you are trying to keep everything in your head, the chances are it's a very quick route to failure, and it's a very quick route to procrastination because we suddenly just become overwhelmed. So thinking about keeping all that stuff in one place that you really trust and coming back to that regularly will really, really help you to avoid procrastination and just feel better and more productive and less stressed in your work more generally as well. So there's kind of two main elements to a second brain that I think are really worth just looking at and recapping. So when most people think of a to-do list, what they end up putting on their to-do list is a kind of weird mixture of projects and people and vague ideas. But getting everything that you need to be working on down to a master actions list. So one place where you can keep all the actions that you could be working on at that time. And then separate to that, having some kind of projects list. So what we find a lot is that people we work with have, maybe a to-do list that's not working that well for them, but a lot of people don't have a projects list. So by projects, what we're really talking is anything that's more than 2 or 3 actions, anything that you want to come back to and track and take care of and, look at, sort of engage with on a kind of weekly basis. Call that a project rather than just a couple of actions. And that will probably mean that you have a larger projects list than you might be used to, but we are all working on a lot of projects. So let's take that seriously. Let's get that stuff out of our head. And that interplay between projects and actions is, again, something that will really help you in being able to define stuff and then therefore not be as prone to procrastination as a result.
Right. Graham, I asked people to share in the chat what they were using as their current second brain tool of choice. So we've got lots of people still loving the paper and pen, that kind of moment of feedback of ticking something off, crossing something off. We've got people having a look at some of the apps and software. So we've got Nirvana, Asana, Trello.
Nirvana and Asana.
Yeah.
So
do you like the way I rhymed them? Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Put your second brain tools of choice in rhyming order. Microsoft Planner, Microsoft To Do.
So there's a whole range of really useful tools out there, and pen and paper can also be a really useful tool, right? Because it's all about what do you trust, what are you going to interact with pleasurably and really feel good about,
commit to
long-term
use. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it doesn't have to be the most flashy tech tool that is available. It might be simple, plain old pen and paper, and if that works for you, great. And then likewise, some of the tech will have some really good functionality that will really help you to get clear and specific. A lot of this is really about how do we create clarity, because from clarity comes momentum. Momentum for me really is the opposite of stress and the opposite of procrastination. So let's talk a little bit more about how a second brain tool can really help you. And this is all about how we manage attention. So it's often said that time is our most precious resource. It's not. Our most precious resource is our attention. So how do we make sure that we manage our attention well? Essentially, it's about recognizing that we have different types of attention. So we have basically 3 types of attention. Proactive attention, that's the time that you have in your day where your mind feels the most switched on, where you have the most energy, where you're able to achieve even the hardest, most difficult stuff that's on your to-do list. At the other end of the scale, we have a thing called inactive attention. If you've ever been sat at your desk, Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon, and you're scrolling up and down your email inbox and you're just kind of staring out into space, and it's like you're managing your time really well at that point. You're at your desk, you're where you should be, but the lights are on and no one's home, right? If you've ever been in that situation, that's what we're talking about, inactive attention. And then the bit in the middle, so you have a good few hours every day have this kind of, so it's all right kind of energy, somewhere in the middle. So how we manage that 2 to 3 hours of proactive attention, where we have the best energy, where we're most switched on, where we're going to have the best ideas, that's what really counts. And if you can really make the most of those 2 to 3 hours a day of proactive attention, you'll find that you procrastinate a lot less, and you'll also find that you get so much done. Really, my experience is that those 2 to 3 hours, people who've really found ways to defend that and really dedicate that to getting deep into focus, just achieve incredible results. Like the amount of times I've been talking to a founder or a CEO or a senior leader, and they tell me some version of, I don't do meetings between this time and this time, or I get up early and I have 2 hours of phone switched off, like really uninterrupted time. Like how we manage that attention, particularly in an age of not just information overload, but news and anxiety, current affairs overload too, right? It really matters to just get your head out of that day-to-day space and much more into what Cal Newport talks about as deep work, right? So just switching that stuff off, getting deep into the thinking, deep into creation, and you'll find that 2 to 3 hours that a day, you can just achieve just a huge amount by doing that. I'm going to talk about a couple of particular techniques that can really help with how getting deep into focus and really kind of putting the right energy on the right stuff. And I'm going to hand over to Lee to do that.
Yeah, so you've got that sort of finite attention supply, finite energy supply in the day, and you're probably well aware of how much of that you have and where it plots in the day. But even when those slots come, sometimes the biggest stoppage is that kind of that inertia, that block, that sort of dust related, I just can't get going. So I quite like these two because they're almost like a sort of Jedi mind trick with yourself, which helps you get over that lizard brain inertia. So the first one, Pomodoro technique, you may have encountered. You may not have realized why it's called the Pomodoro technique. So this is a technique from Francesco Cirillo. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. And the key concept is working in timed dashes. The sort of normal version is 25 minutes and then have a 5-minute break. And then you build those up in blocks of 4 and have a slightly chunkier 20-minute break. But 25 minutes might not suit you in the early days. You might even be doing 20 minutes, 15 minutes. But the key thing about the timer is it makes the passage of time a lot more obvious. Rather than having to convince yourself, I'm going to do the whole of this thing that I really don't want to do, or I'm really not enjoying, or I'm a little bit scared of, the bargain you make with yourself is, I've just got to get through 25 minutes of it, and then I've kind of paid my dues and I'm allowed to stop if I want to. So it's taking the sort of difficulty level off it. But there's also the sort of factor that when time doing the task is counting down rather than counting up as elapsed time, there's almost like a sense of I'm nearly at the finish line. But the same thing that kicks in is that kind of a sense of urgency and focus. So it has the added advantage of not only making the starting feel a little bit easier, but you tend to focus in a lot more during that particular dash as well. So you don't have to have a fancy tomato timer. You can use a timer on your phone. You can get various plugins in your web browser. But just the idea of I'm going to do a small dash and then I can stop can really, really make a big difference in terms of chunking things down. The other one that's really good in terms of crossing the threshold of beginning, because this is always the one I've struggled with the years. Once you've actually started the hated thing, it's usually not as bad as you'd said it was. And immediately you've begun it, you kind of get a sense of a release of guilt and a little bit like, I'm doing it kind of thing. So the other famous phrase that's wrapped around this kind of crossing the threshold is eat the frog. So this is featured in a book by Brian Tracy, but it also itself calls back to quite a famous quote from Mark Twain. And slightly paraphrasing, it goes like, if the first thing you had to do in the morning was eat a live frog, then everything after that would kind of be okay in comparison. So it's not a particularly animal friendly metaphor, but the idea is the frog represents the most guilt laden, posturating task that you're really trying to not think about, and you secretly hope that all your colleagues have forgotten about, so they're not going to ask you about it. And it just has to be worst thing or first of the day. So I've had a couple of times over the years where I've started to notice a little bit of a plague of frogs breaking out, and it really, really weighs you down. So I've even in my second brain of choice, so I'm a Todoist user, I even sometimes throw up a little Todoist label called @frog, and just labeling your frogs. And then I've been on a sort of a little bit of a week-long or a 30-day long frog hunt. Doesn't matter which one you do, but you just got to kill one frog at the start of each morning. And you get that sense of like, I'm doing okay. I'm actually not a bad person. And you get the idea of like, I'm making some progress. And by the end of a week of just doing one frog of your choice each morning, you can really start to make a difference.
Yeah.
So two nice little tips.
Yeah, the eat that frog as a thing. So I often have on my list, I prefer to use the terminology of big rocks, which is a thing from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits. And I quite often have a label on my Nosby, which is my second brain tool, just called big rocks of resistance. So if I know there's things that I'm procrastinating on, if I know there's things that I'm really not that excited about doing, then I tend to just group those together. And then the idea is I'm going to try and do one of those early in the day. And then I'm going to come back later in the day and say, okay, so, do I think I can do another one of those today? And just let everything else fall in around those big rocks. And that's essentially the kind of the Stephen Covey metaphor, is like the big rocks go in first and then everything else, sort of falls in around it at the same time.
But they're both tricking your mind to take out some of that dust difficulty.
That's so
between them.
Tricking your brain into getting started. The other thing I used to do a lot with the eat that frog or big rocks kind of idea is I would have a morning ritual, and the morning ritual would involve going for a run, and it would involve a breakfast, and it would involve shower and all the kind of usual stuff, but I kind of wrote it out. And then the last part of the morning ritual was worst first. So basically eat that frog. And so the purpose of that is it sort of tricks your brain because you're already in the momentum. It's all about momentum, right? So I was in the momentum of the morning routine. This thing, that's the morning routine. Oh, look, I've just eaten a frog without realizing it. So often it's just those things that you can do that kind of trick your brain into getting started. Thanks, Lee. So just let's talk about the morning rituals a little bit more. So one of the things that I think is really vital and really difficult to do is start your day with something other than email, right? So this is just a really common thing that I see a lot. It used to be when I started Think Productive, the kind of route into email would look something like arrive in the office. Remember those? Arrive in the office, sit down at your desk, open up your computer or your laptop, open up Outlook, there's email, go. And nowadays, you're all probably aware watching this that it doesn't look like that because A, there are no offices, and B, it does not involve you waiting to arrive at your desk. It involves you going, like first thing in the morning, grabbing your phone in your bed and going straight into email. So what is email? Email is a list of everybody else's priorities, not yours. So if we want to get mindful, if we want to get really savvy around how we manage our attention, the most important way to be proactive and not reactive is to start your day with your priorities, not everybody else's. So getting into a way of thinking where you can just set the day up. You can, check in with yourself a little bit as well. So I think one of the things with sort of planning our attention and energy and kind of planning our day in that way is that sometimes in theory, you should have the best energy between this time and this time, like whatever you've sort of observed over the years and decided. But there might just be a day where you wake up just a bit tired, or you didn't sleep that well, or kids kept you up, or you're hungover, or you ache because you've been out for a long run the day before, or whatever it is. There might be something that just means that you don't quite feel at the races at that moment. So being able to check in and be mindful with yourself about that, like early on in the day, just checking in with your emotions, checking in with your energy, checking in just kind of physically with yourself. I think that's just a really vital thing to then being able to schedule the right kind of work. And the trick is, when you've got great attention and got great energy, use it. And then when you don't have great attention and great energy, don't beat yourself up for not using it on anything more useful. Like, give yourself permission to do lower value work at the times when you don't necessarily have the best energy and attention. A couple of other tips that I think can really help. So again, particularly when we're trying to work on the difficult stuff. And, one of the things that can really help is just having good focus, as I was saying before. And it's not just email that distracts us. There's obviously just a myriad of digital distractions, particularly when we're also working, as many people are right now, in the same space as we live, and working from kitchen tables, working where there's a pile of laundry in the corner. All these kind of things can distract us. So again, just getting more mindful about how we carry out that deep work. How do we get heads down into that kind of focus mode? So this is digital stealth, right? So a productivity ninja has stealth and camouflage. There's a lovely app on the right-hand side of the screen there called Forest. What Forest does is it solves that problem of, I want to work on my computer, but as I'm working on my computer, I just feel like my phone is calling me. There's something more interesting over there. Let me go and see. So Forest, really nice little app. What you do is you set a timer. So you could set it in conjunction with Pomodoro. So you could say, right, I'm going to do a 25-minute focus piece of work. And then on the screen, Forest will start growing a tree, and that tree will take 25 minutes to grow. You can set it for half an hour, whatever you want to do. If during that time, while you're trying to work on your computer, you pick up your phone and you're tempted to go onto the Twitter screen or the Facebook screen or the WhatsApp screen or whatever, the tree dies, right? So it's just one simple little thing, but one positive piece of psychology that keeps you focused on the task in hand, and keeps you away from all those distractions of your phone. So Forest, really good app. Really recommend having a look at that. And it's fun and playful. And also the thing about Forest is the people who make Forest donate profits to build real forests, so growing real trees in the real world. So you can have genuine climate guilt if you are procrastinating on your work at the same time.
What I found interesting about this agenda as well, we just had a couple of contributions in the chat that people have found that some good habits about not letting email rule their day that they had when in the office, they found it harder to maintain those in work from home, or they've slipped. And then a lot of things I'm hearing from people in our working from home session is that not only is the email hotter than ever, but all the other digital apps and pings and dings are hotter than ever. And not just from work. So if you've got small people in school, the amount of traffic coming from school and other things as well. So,
and it's also the headspace of that, right? So I've got a 6-year-old, and just the schools are having to react and sort of throw so much other stuff at you. And so all of that increases decision fatigue and makes it more difficult to really get your head down and focus. So again, makes some of these tips and tricks just even more important, I think. Let's move on and look at reviews and checklists. So I'm not going to spend too long on this one, but basically one of the things that I found that really stops me from procrastinating is just the idea that I know I'm going to come back and review all of my projects regularly. So I have a thing called the weekly checklist. If you go to Google and just type in Think Productive weekly checklist, we've got some free PDF resources. You can just download that. And that can just be a really nice starting point to creating your own checklist. Also in the review chapter of How to Be a Productivity Ninja, there's a whole kind of exercise around developing your own checklist. And what I find most valuable about that is it just means that once a week, I'm going to go project by project and just work out where I'm at with everything. I'm going to clear the decks. I'm going to get rid of all the bits of paper. I'm going to get my inbox to zero, all those bits of admin at that point get done. And at the end of me doing that review, I just feel so much lighter, clearer, more full of purpose. And it really helps me to then see what's at stake in terms of procrastination. And that really, for me, cuts out a lot of it, is just that sense of specificity, just knowing where you need to be with everything, having defined the actions, joined the dots, seen where the opportunities are to collaborate or do things differently. I think that in itself can just be a huge sort of tool to reduce procrastination. So, ultimately getting momentum is about getting clear and specific. And once you have momentum, it's much more difficult to procrastinate. And then a word about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I think this is a really key part of the whole issue of procrastination. So just so we understand those two terms. So extrinsic is about when something is kind of outside of you. Intrinsic is when something is inside of you. So if we think about intrinsic motivation, we know that we really want to do this thing. We're committed to doing it. We are going to do it. And then for whatever reason, we're self-sabotaging. We're causing this delay that we really don't need. So when we think about that, it's how do we fix ourselves is really the key issue. Then there'll be things that we're procrastinating about that, to be honest, they're not the things at work that really excite us. We don't really want to do them. Maybe we have to do them, but we don't really want to. And it's important to recognize that sometimes it'll be that, right? And my attitude to that is don't try and fix yourself, and don't try and get motivated around that thing because you're just not motivated. Allow somebody else to pull that thing out of you, basically. How do we do that? So a really good example of that is just putting a deadline in somebody else's world. So the thing I mentioned before, where you're saying to your boss, right, like I'll talk to you about this on Monday. Let's sit down and go through it, and then that kind of forces you to do it. Any kind of public commitments or pronouncements, a lot of people would give up smoking or drinking or something by saying, "I have given up smoking," and then you have this bigger fear, which is looking foolish, which replaces any fears that you might have had about health or lung cancer or whatever. So like it just becomes the bigger motivator is everybody else holding you accountable. So anything you can do that just externalizes those things and just creates the momentum somewhere else that's going to drag you along, that's really important around extrinsic motivation. Deadlines are a really good one for that. Public pronouncements, that kind of thing. Whereas if it's more of an intrinsic motivation, you just feel like you're derailing yourself and it just feels silly, then it's easier to kind of fix that and use some of those other techniques. Lee, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, a lot of people are just sort of coming in again on the digital side. I know one of your things is like raw willpower is weak.
Yeah.
So there's sort of self-denial. You often kind of need a little bit of help. So I've been talking to people about looking at like ways of working in, for instance, Gmail offline. And then the whole sort of category of the sort of digital self-denial apps. So things like off time, screen limit, quality time. Again, those have really helped. Anybody with small people, Google Family Link is amazing. The ability to turn your small person's apps off remotely, and then hear them upstairs going, "Oi!" when you've turned off their WhatsApp. Setting things on a timed schedule, either for them or for yourself as well, could be a really good one.
Yeah, I use quality time on my phone. So quality time for Android basically kicks in at certain times of the day and just denies me access to things like Twitter and Google Chrome and stuff like that. The other one that I used for years before I was using quality time, and I've actually gone back to doing this more recently, is actually putting my entire Wi-Fi network at home on a time switch. So like at midnight, it switches off.
I like that.
And then it doesn't switch on until like 8 a.m. And it's kind of slightly rough because the time switch is a bit cranky, but it's basically midnight till 8 a.m. No internet. I guess I'm kind of doing that partly just because it feels good to just have those things shut down and not have the energy being drained.
Literally one of those timer switches.
Yeah, like one of those old school 3 for a tenner on Amazon.com. Very easy to get those.
I'm getting a lot of love for the Google Family Link. So nice. Google Family Link, you can track what apps are being used for how long. You can allow certain limits on each app. You can activate them and turn them off at certain times a day.
Cool.
Super useful.
I'm just going to say 3 quick things, and then we are going to open it up for chat and questions. So the first one is think about mindfulness. So we talked before about this idea of procrastination, that it's not just about delaying the delivery of something, but it's also just feeling really bad about that. And one of the things that can really boost your motivation and really create that momentum is just to be mindful about how far you've come. So in the day-to-day, we're so stressed on the past and the future, basically. Like we're regretting the things that we haven't done. We're thinking ahead and being worried about things that might be coming up in the future. And we often just miss the whole thing of like, look where we're at, look how far we've come. There's this meme going around on Instagram at the moment about like how it started and how it's going. And I think it's one of those things we don't think about often enough in our day-to-day.
We need to get on one of those for our social feed.
We should do it. Yeah, I'm working on Instagram more generally, of just being a bit more, a bit more on there and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely in the pipeline to be latching onto those kind of things. And then this is my slide to take the mickey out of self-help books, having written 5 of them. But yeah, I think so many books start with this premise that the author is some kind of genius guru who knows everything and gets everything perfectly right. And you just need to be a bit more like the person who's written the book and then you'll be okay. And I just find that so alienating. I feel like with productivity, everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn. And we're all human. And so when it comes to procrastination, it's really worth remembering that if somebody, if you feel like you're screwing this up regularly, just know that everybody else that you admire is also screwing this up regularly too. If you are feeling imposter syndrome, just recognize that you are an imposter and so is everybody else.
Yeah, including us, you and me, Graham.
Yeah. So when I wrote Productivity Ninja, one of the things I put in there was
no gurus.
A Productivity Ninja is a human and not superhero. So what that means is we can, if we adopt some of these techniques, seem like and feel like we have special powers and we can do all this stuff that feels really amazing, but we will also screw it up sometimes. And it's really worth just taking note of that and being okay with that. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Just before I do, a couple of quick things just to let you know about. So if you're not subscribed to my podcast, it's called Beyond Busy. We interview people every week on their views on productivity and also on happiness and success, work-life balance, and joining the dots between those big themes, just asking difficult questions about how people work and how people live. So sign up to Get Beyond Busy in your podcast feed or getbeyondbusy.com. I am also running a 6-week evening course. It's the first time we've ever done an evening course, and it's coming up in November. It's called 6 Weeks to Ninja, and I would love you to be there. So if you want to sign up for that, there's details on the screen there of what we're going to be covering on each of the 6 weeks. And really the way I'm thinking about this is going to be a small group, so it's going to be no more than 30 people. And what I'm planning to do is create a lot of accountability so people can kind of really hold each other to account, create some community around it, and basically spend 6 weeks really kicking your productivity into shape and going through all the major stuff from Productivity Ninja. So if you've read Productivity Ninja and not implemented it all, if you're new to this whole thing, this is all the stuff that I usually would do in a one-day masterclass, and we're doing it over 6 weeks with homework in between, with a WhatsApp group for accountability. And if you want to get some money off, use the code tomorrow, so TMRW. And if you go up to Eventbrite, you can find the link. I think Apple, who's online, might actually have the link to put in the chat as well. So we'll do that.
You're getting a lot of love in the chat for both the podcast and the book, Graham.
Thanks. That's very kind. Thank you. And then I've just, over the last few weeks, been launching this new mailing list called Rev Up for the Week, which is basically a positive thought in your inbox every Sunday. So if you want to sign up to that, just go to grahamallcott.com. And then finally, as Lee was mentioning at the beginning, we run a whole range of workshops, which we do in normal times. We do a lot of them face-to-face in the room. We actually do all of them now on Zoom as well. And if your company is not on Zoom, we do them on Teams or wherever you are. So if you're interested in that, then you can go to thinkproductive.co.uk, and we'll just stick a link in the chat for that as well. So just while we're getting on to questions, we have talked about quite a few different ideas there. And what I'd love is just you can tick as many of these as you like, but what are the ones that you're going to take away and implement? So we've got using dust to diagnose your procrastination. So difficult, undefined, scary, tedious. Using a second brain for projects and actions. The Pomodoro technique. Eat that frog. Using morning rituals. Digital stealth mode. Using reviews and checklists. And also just remembering that we're human. So yeah, interested to see your responses to that. So 68 of you out of 126.75. Good votes coming in, because you might be clicking lots and lots of them, and then we can't see who's finished voting. We just know who started voting. But we'll just give you a second to do that, and then we'll end that one. But I can tell you, out in front right now is Eat That Frog and Using Dust to Diagnose, and that's good.
I'm good. That means we got one each, because you did dust and I did eat the frog.
There you go.
I feel like there's a victory there for both of us.
Cool. So let's open it up for some questions. I'll leave that on the screen. Great. Any questions in the chat, Lee? And also, if you're on Insta Live, hello, there's a few people on Insta Live. If you want to ask any questions on there, I'll see them. Yeah,
the chat, but one of the themes that's been throughout the chat has been the this is tricky normally, but like this is a lot trickier in work from home lockdown world. So this is a lot of the themes we've been talking about on that workshop, but the lack of structure, the lack of boundaries, the lack of signals about on duty versus off duty. Stealth and camouflage was tricky when we used to share space with offices, but of course now we're sharing space with other humans at home. So, you know, a lot of the similar challenges, but are just manifesting in different ways as well.
Yeah.
Lindsay says, you spoke of tricking your brain, but my brain knows it's being tricked and fights it. So you have to throw it off the scent with some different maneuvers that it's not used to.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is like, if you find that your procrastination is becoming habitual, then you also need to stop your responses being habitual, right? So if it's happening regularly, you need to throw different things at it, you know, and sort of try different approaches and see what works. And sometimes you'll find something will work really well for a year and then it will stop working, you know. So false deadlines is often one of those, right, where people can kind of use false deadlines for a bit and then they just get so used to it being a false deadline.
We've got two anonymous questions in the actual Q&A, so well done finding the Q&A.
Cool, someone found the Q&A.
I'll say both. You answer one and I'll say the other. Okay. So one person says, how do you ensure the time to manage your lists? So I know you're going to talk about weekly review. Yeah. And then the other one says, how do you do inbox zero when you got 3 years backlog of emails? So
let's do the inbox zero question first, because I think the answer to that is very simple.
Yeah.
So how do you do inbox zero where you have a 3-year backlog of emails? So I would slightly reframe that, because a 3-year backlog of email does not mean that you've got 3 years of useful emails in that backlog. The way email works just inherently is that the last month or so of what you've got is useful and valuable, and most of what's in the remaining 2 years and 11 months is either complete rubbish, or in all seriousness might have some useful reference material that you need to come back to. So I would either delete or file in 1, 2, or maximum of kind of 3 big chunks, 2 years and 11 months of that, and then you do inbox zero on the last month. So then it becomes much easier. And my book has a whole chapter called Ninja Email, which basically the promise of that chapter is this chapter plus 2 hours of your time, you'll get to zero. And it's probably the thing, ironically, that I get the most emails about related to the book is about that chapter and inbox zero. So going by Productivity Ninja.
And on the question about when do you find time to manage your lists, I think the theme there is for a lot of people, like, list wrangling is a kind of on again, off again behavior. When you're kind of a bit okay, you can fiddle with your lists, but when the pressure rises, you kind of drift off list. So the whole theme that's explored in the book around the organize and the review chapters is that a lot of that working alongside your second brain things becomes a more constant and continual kind of buddy system. And actually, when it's chugging along really nicely, particularly with the review habit, it's almost an invisible activity. So it doesn't feel like an extra piece of kind of meta admin that you're having to do. It's kind of built in along the way.
Meta admin.
Yeah, there we go. I'll give you one last question and then I think you'll want to wrap up.
Sure.
Somebody's asked, any tips on reframing your personal expectations to avoid presenteeism? That feels like another work from home boundaries kind of question.
Say that again. Any tips to avoid?
Reframing your personal expectations to not fall into the trap of presenteeism.
Yeah, okay. So I can talk to this for me personally, which is that I sometimes fall into this trap when I'm busy of sort of guilt presenteeism. So I know that I am my own boss, but it's like, it's just like weird. I'm my own boss, but I'm also holding myself to just ridiculous standards of being at my desk all the time and all the rest of it. And so then I feel guilty about things that are really useful and worthwhile for me, like going for a run, going for a walk in the woods, which is, I've learned over the years that going for a walk in the woods is also where I have all my best ideas. So it's not even just a nice, frivolous, nice to have downtime thing. It's actually a really important part of my work, because it kind of helps me to be more mindful and generate ideas and stuff. So what I found really helps with that is, because I'm my own boss, is actually to manage myself as if I am my own boss. So writing down stuff like, okay, so permission to do this, like scheduling it into my calendar, that kind of stuff. I also do a thing called create time, which basically is the time where I'm going to get into that deep work kind of monk mode sort of aesthetic of screening out emails and all the noise and everything else and really getting deep into focus. I put that in my Outlook calendar in a particular color, so I kind of use purple for it, and nothing else is purple, only those. But it allows me to say, this is the time where I'm dedicated and focused on this particular thing. And then that just kind of, for some reason, just making it more explicit, like having it written down or having it on the screen, makes me more likely to stick to it rather than just, having it in my head as a good idea.
I think the other thing, Joe, the last thing to say on that one, there's been so many good questions. I'm having to wrestle with the fact I didn't get to all of them. There's one activity on the working from home workshop, which is the permission slip. And it's like giving yourself permission to say, do you know what? This is a weird world we're working in right now. And particularly those of us who are a perfectionist, want to be available all the time, just saying, look, there's a certain amount we can do and still say happy, healthy, sustainable. And that's not only okay, that's like really important to recognize as well, because everyone else is feeling it right now too.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I quite enjoy doing on these kind of things is wrapping up and saying thank you for being here, but also then hanging around for another 10 minutes and answering some more questions. Are you able to do that, Lee?
Of course I am.
Should we do
Why would I want to go off anywhere else?
So what we'll do is we will officially bring this to an end and just say thank you everybody for being here on this first of our new series of free webinars. We're going to be doing these every month, by the way. So if you go to thinkproductive.co.uk, the top menu bar there has free webinars, and you can
on lots of different topics.
Yeah,
not just repeats of this one.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm personally going to be doing one next month with Jess, who works at Think Productive HQ, on how to say no. And then I'm also doing one for World Kindness Day on the productivity of kindness, which I'm very excited about. It's all about the kindness. Here you go. But yeah, I'm just going to say thank you for being part of this. We are going to hang around in the after dark bit for another 10-15 minutes or so. So if you've got more questions,
after show mode. I love that.
After show. But thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this webinar. I hope you found it valuable. Drop us a line if you have other questions, want to connect, and all that stuff. But thank you for being part of this webinar.
Cool. Do you want me to field you another of the unanswered questions from the Q&A?
Yes, let's do that.
So from Anon...
I always feel, by the way, like once I've done that bit, then I can sort of just like have more fun and be a bit more...
move around a bit.
But
this is where it's okay for my cat to...
It's all the same.
Have you been Zoom bombed by pets during a live broadcast yet? My cat's done it to me twice. Yeah,
all the time. And I'm going to just check and see if there's any questions on Insta Live as well. But yeah.
So
feel free to.
Anon says, I'm finding I'm procrastinating by doing other quotes unquote productive stuff around the house, washing, tidying, general life admin, justifying it to myself as it being worthwhile, but it's not helping my work.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's kind of like a double-edged sword to this idea of productive procrastination, right? So doing other useful things to stop doing the most important useful thing. So on the one hand, yes, you can start to feel very guilty about productive procrastination and getting all the washing up done, keeping your room tidy and all that stuff. Think back to when we were all at school and university and stuff. When it was exam season or there was an essay due was the time when our bedrooms were all the tidiest.
Oh yeah.
So this is inherently learned behavior. The other way to look at it, though, I think, is a lot of those tasks, what's happening in the brain is as you complete those, the brain releases dopamine. So dopamine is the reward chemical, and it's a very addictive chemical too. So when dopamine is like released in your brain, because it's addictive, you're then chasing the next hit. So I would argue that just doing something useful just to get a hit of dopamine is actually better than sitting there beating yourself up doing nothing useful.
I'm doing like in between like Pomodoro dashes, like that 5-minute break will be okay. I do one household thing. I'll load the dishwasher once, or I'll put the washing machine on spin. And not allow myself to do more than one of those before going back to work. But actually, the fact that you're from home and you're doing that stuff and you're not having to hit it when you come back from your trip or your office, generally the household things are kind of kicked a bit more into shape than they used to be.
Yeah.
And and the fact that I'm clocking off at whatever time, but not having to travel home means I'm a bit more up for cooking a proper meal and everything else like that.
That's the other thing about the relationship between office working and working from home is that, for a lot of people, they've gone from spending 2 hours a day on the commute to getting those 2 hours back. And, what I'm seeing is then what are people doing with that time? They're generally using that time to also feel guilty and beat themselves up.
Yeah. So those 2 hours are yours. It's not like you get those 2 hours and you're supposed to give them to work. So again, when I'm hearing about things, people saying that's when I'm exercising, that's when I'm reading my book, that's when I'm actually having a little bit more time with the small people than I used to get.
Yeah.
People have started to really cherish some of that stuff. But it is hard, you're right, when you're thinking, I should be doing more work because the laptop's just over there.
Yeah,
throw a blanket over the laptop and tell it it's gone to bed till tomorrow and stuff like that.
I just noticed on the Zoom thing that it said start sharing the results. So I just shared them now. But did I not share the results before?
I did that, don't worry.
Oh, you did? Okay, cool. All right.
No, people saw it. It was fine. One here from Hannah in the non-anonymous questions. How do you deal with getting your tasks done if you're waiting on input or help from a colleague that you need to proceed? So at waiting tags, at waiting lists.
So how do you deal with progressing stuff when the thing is stuck because someone else is procrastinating, not you, basically? So one of the areas that I have on my to-do list is just called the waiting list. And so when I'm going through and sort of going project by project as part of my review, some of it is like, this one's progressing, but I'm waiting on this person. And so the review is often my prompt to chase that person up. But sometimes it might be like, it's only been a day, I want to give them a bit more time. But I also don't want to lose the fact that someone needs to do this thing in order for me to progress my project. So those are the things I put on the waiting list. And then the idea is that, in a few days, you'll come back and see that again, and then you'll be tracking it. And it has kind of somewhere to live. The same is true of email. So one of the things that's in the Ninja email chapter of Productivity Ninja is the idea of having a waiting folder. So you can either click and drag your sent items in there, or you can chuck, what I often do is just chuck the email that I've replied to, from the other person, put that in there, and then that's emaugh of a trigger for me to say, oh yeah, I need to get back to that person about that thing.
But it's really nice to have those in separate bins. So, you have emails where the ball is in my court in your action or read folder, email where some moving part or it's on stop because another person's doing their bit or in the waiting folder. And you do need to let them do their part, but you also don't want to lose track of all those balls that are out there in the universe because some of them might not come back on schedule. But
Elena, who's Think Productive's MD, will often know when it's me doing my review because I send her about 15 emails that say, what's happening with this? Just wondering about that. What's happening with this? What's happening with this? And it's like...
We also know when you've been for a walk in the forest because that's when we get the emails going, I've just had this idea. What do you think?
Crazy idea. Do you have any other questions in there, Lee?
Let's have a look.
Could you just 70 people on, so everybody stuck around for. Thank you all.
Could
for staying
you just
around for the after dark.
Recap the dust? So
should I put the slide up?
Yeah.
Move that.
So this was a sort of the way I use dust is it's a kind of why am I procrastinating? Why am I resisting this thing? And there's potentially the 4 different reasons why you might be procrastinating. It doesn't mean that you just have to just one in play, but it allows you to sort of start to diagnose, is the word you were using, about what the particular problem was as well.
It's for some reason not letting me.
That's all right.
Switch the slides, so I'm going to go back that way, which is really annoying, isn't it? There you go. Keep going.
There you go.
Ah! I've been getting too. There you go. There's dust.
So the way I would use this would be just like the preliminary step before launching a frog hunt is to label and identify your frogs. The preliminary step for me to working out why I'm procrastinating something is to try and work out which of these is in play. And then if it's too difficult, I might chunk it with a Pomodoro or something. If it's too undefined, it's probably around the projects and next actions. Or maybe I just need to go back to the person and say, I need a tighter brief, or I need to know more what delivered and finished looks like. Scary, maybe it's too hard. Maybe I don't know how to do it. Maybe I need help. Maybe I need to swap the really scary parts with someone else who's got a bit more expertise. Or maybe I kind of need to up the reward side on the intrinsic motivation.
The other thing about scary, by the way, so difficult, undefined, scary, tedious. Like for me, the other thing about scary is it's worth, if you've not read it, checking out The Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters. So he talks about the idea of your mind having a chimp in the same way that we talk about the lizard brain. It's kind of like the same concept. It's both basically the amygdala. And one of the things he says is take your chimp for a walk. I think it's exercise your chimp or take your chimp for a walk. And the idea is work out why that's scary, and then do that by like writing it all down in like ridiculous detail. So you literally go, I'm scared about this because of
like a journaling
thing. Journal it, just write it down, just getting out of your head. So again, often the reason these things get stuck and remain stuck is because we don't move them around or do anything with them. But these are thoughts that are going to limit us. So just actually putting that down on the page, you start to move the thought around, and shaking that up will often just create the space to.
For the tedious one of dust, I just need to really pump it up. So like if something's really tedious, like when I used to work in a further education college, marking assignments from students that they put an awful lot of love into, so I needed to pay attention to them. But when you're marking 150 of them, it's kind of hard. That's when you get the Spotify on. That's when you get the tunes pumping. Nice cup of coffee, and you go, I just need to do half an hour of this a day, and it burns, but I'll get it over with.
It's the art of finding the right thing on Netflix to do alongside expense claims. And
Netflix didn't exist when I was marking essays, so that's how long it is.
For me, I can't. Like, I just recently watched The Fall, and a little while ago I binged the Michael Jordan thing. I'm not a massive Netflix guy, but both of those are things that you can't really do anything else while you're watching. So if I'm doing like expense claims or a really long, tedious report or something that sort of takes half my brain, the main way that I'll do that is I'll go back and revisit stand-up comedy that I really like, but I know pretty well, like I've seen a few times before, or like The Office or something that I've just watched that I'm really familiar
company
with. So it's still company in its background and it's fun, but it's not requiring enough of my thoughts. It's like finding that like middle ground with them. And it's the same with podcasts as well, right? There's like certain podcasts that you really have to concentrate on, and then other ones that are just really nice. Like my favorite background one is the Frank Skinner sort of Absolute Radio podcast, which is like just him just bantering with two other people for like an hour and a half, and he's just very witty and funny. But yeah, like you can kind of drift in and out and do your stuff around it. So you've got to find the right stuff.
So I'm noting that we're at the far end of our 15-minute after show. So what's good is that people have found this useful, and I think that means we might get people having a look at the future seminars as well.
Let's hope so, yeah.
I can't not congratulate Stephen, though, who said in the chat that they've saved an hour on the morning commute, and that's been turned into extra time in bed and has had a measurable health improvement in terms of blood pressure drop. Absolutely. So yeah, human not superhero points for that. Absolutely.
Cool. Have we got one? Is there one final question in there before we wrap this up?
Rosie asks, procrastination versus writer's block. And I know to not open that box of frogs at 1 minute past 3, but I think a lot of the stuff you said around the dusting it and the background noise and company and stuff, if the thing you're procrastinating around is writing, then I was Claire's saying, where's the best place to get the book?
I want to say one other thing about writing. Give me what Claire said, and then I'll
where'd you get the book from? Everywhere.
Productivity Ninja, all the places. But I'll tell you what,
that sell books.
Can you go and please buy it from Hive instead of buying it from Amazon? So Hive, if you don't know, is an online retailer that takes its stock from local bookshops. So support your local bookshop, and if you can't go and buy one in a bookshop right now, use Hive. Don't use Amazon.
Plus available as an ebook.
It's on
places you get ebooks
other
and on Audible as well. So lots of places to do
don't
it.
get Kindle either. The writing thing. So there's a quote that I included in Productivity Ninja that has really inspired me over the years around writer's block, which is the singer Erykah Badu, who I'm a big fan of. And she was interviewed once. She said, I'm in a downloading period right now. I used to call it writer's block, but then I got wise. And, I think, again, so back to the thing of, if you really feel like there's no inspiration for writing, then use that productively by doing good research and doing good, journaling or structuring or the other things that you need to do around the actual physical typing. And I find that sometimes even just recognizing that you're in that downloading phase and sort of giving it a useful verb rather than, so when she says downloading, she's not talking about downloading her music. She's talking about kind of downloading ideas, getting inspiration, all that sort of thing. And I find that if I'm doing that, then I start to just get motivated to get my fingers back to the keyboard and, just looking at the blank page again and starting. So that's a really valuable thing for me. Cool.
I think we should wrap up and say goodbye.
Cool. So yeah, just thank you so much for all the people who've stayed around this long. It is a bit of a construct having it's 45 minutes and then we're going to continue. But I always just feel like the last bit is these are the real people.
Yeah. In almost all of the sessions we've done. So we've done a lot of work from home sessions, remote leadership sessions, the virtual meeting sessions. There's always a good 10-minute of after show.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the good stuff comes in.
Yeah, for sure. But thank you for being here. I'd love to see some of you on the 6 Weeks to Ninja program. So if you just go to Eventbrite and look up 6 Weeks to Ninja, and if you would be interested in bringing us in to help your team, it's just thinkproductive.co.uk. And we'll be here next month with another one, How to Say No. So I'll see you then. And thanks for being here. And thanks Lee and Apple as well for being part of this and making this first one.
My end of
really good
reward, as well as another cup of coffee in my Ninja mug, is first episode of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery has just dropped. so my working day ends at 3:30, and that's what I'm doing.
All good. Thanks all.
Thanks everyone.